Can you break it or do you? All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. For those of you who weren't here earlier for the public hearing, you may notice we've got a slightly different arrangement we're trying out here to try and bring people a bit closer to council and the communicating, and to make give us a bit more access to staff. I'm going to jump right into this. We have an amended agenda. We have a couple of new items added to it, so I wouldn't mind a motion just to approve the amended agenda.
Move the amended agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you very much. First item on the, and that I also would like to move, sorry, I should have said that, items 13 and 14 related to the cannabis bylaws forward in that agenda as part of that amendment. First item, though, was just our minutes and reports, looking to a motion to approve the inaugural council minutes.
So moved.
Yeah, just a quick amendment.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Councillor Ney.
Just, sorry, yeah, is that the inaugural? No, inaugural minutes that we're just doing right now? Is that what we're doing?
Yes, correct. Oh, sorry, looking at Tuesday, October 9th.
Oh, the actual, okay.
Yeah, and then the inaugural meeting.
Okay, we're doing them separately?
I was going to do them together, but if you have some changes, let's make those changes now.
So on the November 5th, where it says on the council appointment, CRD Arts Committee, it's actually CRD Arts Commission.
Okay,
Just
thank
a
you.
minor.
No, it's good to get it right. Thank you. Any other changes to either one of those? Actually, I'll do them separately, but so we have a motion for the inaugural at this point. Any other changes? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Unopposed? And then the minutes of October the 9th.
Move minutes from October 9th.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Changes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Unopposed? Thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to bring forward those two items, items numbers 13 and 14 on the amended agenda, which is the two items related to cannabis and the zoning bylaw. The reason I'm doing this for those in the audience is just that procedurally, after a public hearing is completed, we're no longer allowed to accept any additional information. So just to prevent anything else from sort of interfering with that process, we'd like to move these items early in the agenda so that we actually deal with them right away. So with that, I'm going to, sorry, I'm just going to switch my notes. I'm in the right spot here. And we'll do number 14 first, which is the subject to public hearing, Bylaw 3531.103. Is there any additional information that staff would like to put at this point? Seeing none. Okay, so at this point, the that bylaw, which has had first, second, and third reading, or sorry, first and second reading, is now up for debate by this body. Sorry, bylaw number 3531.103, the zoning amendment bylaw. There's no point in doing the ticketing if we don't pass this. So
I'll move first and second reading of bylaw number 3531.
No, we've already done the first and second reading. Sorry, we're now debating the bylaw itself after having the public hearing. So we have a couple of options here. We can continue third and final reading and adoption, or we can
Your Worship, if I may, so it is third reading and final adoption that we're asking for consideration. Okay, just wanted to clarify. So we'd need a motion on third reading.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Is it procedurally better for us to have the motion for third reading and then a debate?
Your Worship, it would be appropriate to put a motion on the floor and then
Okay,
debate.
so if we could have a motion for third reading.
I'll move third reading of bylaw 3531.103.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. I'm looking to my council here as to what they would like to do. We have a motion on the table. If there's no debate, I'll just call the question. But Councillor Green.
Thank you, Your Worship. being that this is my first meeting as a new council member, and because I was not part of previous discussions concerning this issue, I have to say that at some point I was confused about the issue, just because of the materials I received, and I asked for clarification, but it was difficult for me to understand what we were really wanting to do with this issue. So the first thing, I think my first point is that our messaging, I think, needed more clarity, at least from my perspective. And secondly, it seems to me, first and foremost, that this is really a zoning issue, a land use issue, a decision about the kind of commercial enterprises we want in the community. This is not, from my perspective, a moral issue. I think our speakers this evening made the point clearly that cannabis is a legal substance, both federally and provincially, and therefore I believe communities, if they wish to participate in legal activity, and it is legal activity now, we have to decide location, we have to decide buffer zones, we have to decide how sensitive we are to youth and to families and to children. And in fact, Oak Bay does have at least 3 alcohol outlets. Oak Bay sells cigarettes at most of its small markets. So if we're concerned about a public health and safety issue, that already exists. I don't believe this is a public health, and I don't believe it's a safety issue. I believe it is a public health issue. And I know other communities are developing policies and processes to establish a legal business certainly for medical cannabis. So at this point in time, I'm really not sure what to do. I'll be very honest with you, based on the material I have in front of me and what I am hearing the public who attended and spoke tonight saying to me or saying to us as a body. So those are my comments at this point. I would appreciate hearing comments from other councillors.
Councillor Ney?
Yeah, can I ask a question to staff?
You
Mr.
may.
Mayor, through you, Mayor. Then to staff, if I recall, and I saw the previous reports when the council was deliberating this issue and made the decision to move it to public hearing, my understanding at the time, and just confirming with staff, was that the decision was made because of the extraordinary amount of work to put together to deal with all the different zoning amendments and the consultations that would be required to legalize cannabis consumption lounge. Was that the point? Just confirming with staff.
Ms. Jensen?
Sure. So just a little bit of a reminder to council. Going back to July, we brought a number of options forward to council as to how we could move forward with legalizing cannabis in the community. So there's a very strict framework that local governments can operate under. So we are not dealing with whether cannabis is allowed or not, but we are dealing with, as Councillor Green mentioned, we are dealing with land use. We are dealing with business licensing. So we can look at issues such as siting of those businesses, how close do you want them to schools, and so on. So that's the type of framework that we need to have in place. So when this report came forward in July, it was to say, does council want to use the staff resources now to develop that framework, or do we temporarily prohibit the uses until such time that you direct us to develop that framework? And much of that based on staff workload.
Could, just for the public, because I think it was never an issue, a moral issue, as Councillor Green has stated. It was really a resource issue for us, and so we deferred it. And I don't believe we put any time limits at the time. I just wonder if staff could confirm that through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff.
To staff.
No, there are no time limits on this. I would anticipate council providing direction to staff as to when you would like us to look at it.
And just one more thing through you, Mayor, to staff is how much is there any way for you to help us understand how much work is involved here? Like, how do you gauge that? Like, how can you help us understand? It's not a small amount of work. It's quite a more phenomenal amount.
I think it would depend on the type of approach council would like us to take. We could certainly follow a format that we've seen other municipalities or this municipality use in terms of those general guidelines, location to school, how many in a block, et cetera. Or do you want us to take a more comprehensive look with public input and so on to determine what that looks like?
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to vote that we move forward as the council has already agreed, the previous council. But what I would like to do is to see if we could bring this up at our strategic priorities early in the new year, revisit this and get more detail from staff about what this would look like if we were to move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Nate. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be speaking in favor of the motion and moving forward with the bylaw. With respect to the meeting, the report from July 2018 that laid out the various options from staff. I recall the decision made then, and I'm still in support of it, that frankly we just don't have the resources today to put all of the legislative mechanisms in place. So that's one of the bases for moving forward with the what appears to be a prohibiting, what's the word that's being used? Prohibition in our bylaw, but prohibition simply on the sale within a business facility within Oak Bay. It's not on the usage. It's not on buying it in another part of Victoria or another part of Canada and bringing it into Oak Bay and using it here. It's not none of those sort of prohibitions. In fact, I don't think we even have the legal capacity to be able to do something like that. It's simply that I believe we don't have the resources available today with our small staff and our small district and our small tax base. One of the things that I've very much appreciated that Oak Bay has taken as a strategic approach is let other districts, let other cities, let other towns bring in regimes, bylaws, bring in whatever they need to bring in for some new approach to whatever it happens to be from a municipal perspective. Let them make the mistakes on their dime. And then when they fix it and tweak it until it's just right, then Oak Bay comes in and says, oh my goodness, look at that. Now we know exactly what to do. So to a large extent, it's inconvenient. From a convenience perspective, I absolutely agree with some of the speakers. With respect to convenience, quality of life, and access, there is a concern with respect to some of those aspects. However, we just don't have the tax base, I believe, or the time to bring this in today. And I noticed on option 1 with respect to that report back in summer of last year, there's quite a number of things that would need to be changed and brought in Oak Bay for all of the licensing regime to be set up. This also speaks a bit, in some ways, to the fact that we don't have many of the regulatory mechanisms in place that many of our larger municipalities have in place. I think this would be an excellent place for us to use, for example, a temporary use permit. Which the legislation says if we go through a whole process of setting up a temporary use regime or access, we could bring in very innovative things. We just don't have that in place today, unfortunately. That's one of the many, many, many things that we have to finish and get ourselves back, shall we say, up to speed with respect to all of our fellow districts and towns and cities with respect to the expectations of the public. I definitely will support I think it was a staff recommendation to proceed with the I'd have to call it a temporary prohibition until not just when do we get the resources and the time, but until we actually see those mistakes made by our fellow councils, and then basically pick up their wonderful bylaws and apply them to the Oak Bay situation. I do notice, a final point, if I may, Chair, is that we don't have a gas station in Oak Bay. we have to actually drive to another district. We have a convenience problem. We have an access problem. We can't get gas in Oak Bay. We need to solve this problem right away. You could make a case for that. Of course, that's a silly approach, but I'm just trying to make the point that we just simply have to walk up to Hillside or walk just across the border. And thankfully, in Victoria and in Saanich, there are options available for many, many people that I know in Oak Bay who take and use this product, both medicinal and non-medicinal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. Councillor Braithwaite, then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. So I'm in agreement basically with the things that have been said so far, but I do have a couple of questions through you, Chair, for staff. One of the speakers, I think it was the last speaker, spoke about the provincial licensing application process and how onerous that was. Do we have any information on that? I'm sorry to throw that at you right now, but on a basic time frame of what the provincial licensing application, how long that might take?
Your Worship, we don't have a sort of an estimate from the province on how long this is taking. Certainly the industry has indicated that it's quite onerous, and so it does take quite a bit of time and effort on their part. And I just wanted to maybe clarify that when, in fact, the province does receive an application, it's to the province and they make a referral to the municipality. So it's then the municipality to consider what our view is respecting that application.
So through you, Chair, if I might just have a follow-up to that. So if, for example, I wanted to open up a shop in Oak Bay and we didn't have a bylaw on that yet, and could I go to the province and seek my application prior, and so that's in process, so that when Oak Bay did have their bylaw in place, then it would not take so very long?
Your Worship, yes, you can make an application. I'm not sure if it would be wise, in that you would pretty much know that the municipality, if it wasn't in a position to permit that through its zoning, that the referral would be quite clear. So as I said earlier, quite a bit of effort to get that application together and into the province. So I think a lot of businesses are probably sort of assessing the risk and determining where their best efforts are put at this point in time. So.
Thank you. And I know that another speaker spoke about trying to put a timeline on this, and I heard it a couple of times here as well. And I'm wondering if that is something that is feasible for us to add into a bylaw or not.
If I'll probably direct it over to Mr. Jones. I think there's probably a couple of ways. Adding it to the bylaw may be difficult, but perhaps giving some further direction after this to give some timelines to staff and some guidance.
Your Worship, I think that's correct. You wouldn't put it in the bylaw. You could provide us some direction following your consideration of the bylaw, or the other option someone mentioned was referring it to the priorities, where you would consider it in conjunction with the other priorities that council may have.
Thank you. And just one last comment. I know that people are concerned about how long something like this might take, but I was reminded the other day when I was out and about that I think the licensing for the penny farthing took 3.5 years, and alcohol is legal at that time as well. So hopefully this won't take as long. So,
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. I guess on this, I am leaning towards support for this, because I think that it's consistent with what other municipalities who are facing the same concerns that we are looking at this as as stated before, not a moral issue, but it's a land application issue. It's really where would these businesses, if they were allowed, be located in a community, and that's probably the most serious concern that many residents have in this community. But I again, just to back up what Councillor Braithwaite said, we heard about pre-application processes in the time with the government, and my understanding when I, as a resident, listened to all of this, it was that this wasn't to prohibit the sale of non-medical cannabis, but to allow us to deal with the issue as a land planning application issue. But if from what we've heard tonight, if in fact applications go to the the provincial government first, and they can't get the applications approved, then that is concerning. So I think a time frame would be important. And I'm, again, in listening to what other speakers have said, if we get one or two applications coming forward, I am a little concerned about time and effort required to process the applications, and so perhaps at priorities we would want to give some consideration to drafting general guidelines or proposed approaches that this community might be willing to consider and to review these applications if they did come forward by. I do like Langford's using a temporary use permit because they have some pretty practical considerations and guidelines and applications of the process. We don't have, I understand, the temporary use permit available to us in this municipality, but I think that was a good route to go to. So perhaps that's something also that we could consider at priorities time, just to be able to maneuver through this process in a little bit more manageable format for retail sales to proceed, but in a more controlled fashion and in a timely manner too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Green, again, you had a...
Yes, I'll be brief.
Oh, sorry, I'll let... Okay, go ahead, Councillor Green, and we're going to...
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to staff, do we have the capacity at this time, if a provincial application was referred to us? I guess my question is, do we have the capacity in the department to process an application like that?
Go ahead, staff, if you can answer that question.
Certainly, if I may, it does depend on what land use regime we have in place. But in fact, there's a referral request, and we basically have several options to bring forward to council to consider. So it's pretty straightforward in that respect, and particularly if, in fact, you prohibit in your zoning bylaw, you're really unable to say yes to the province on this topic if your land use bylaw says no to the use. So.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for the clarity. That helps me. Two things very quickly. I think I would like Oak Bay to be showing some leadership on this issue, first of all. We have had, I believe, in Oak Bay, a tendency to wait and see. And waiting and seeing doesn't necessarily address the issues at hand. So I guess I'm looking for a more proactive approach to this issue. And secondly, I understand now the sort of conundrum and dilemma that we have as a community. I agree that we should be looking at other models, other community models on how this is handled. But frankly, I think we have the ability as a community to show leadership, and I appreciate that chance to comment again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the risk of retreading what's kind of already been said, I really see this very much as a resourcing issue. I want to acknowledge and really state clearly to everybody who's come to state their opinion that I really value, the positive benefits that you're relating to council that's afforded by cannabis, used in the appropriate way. I see this very much directly as a resourcing issue for staff, and the need to associate quite a lot of resources to get the necessary bylaw language for proper management. I just see it very much in relation to our resources and our strategic process, and as far as how we assign resources at the staff level. So I'm very supportive of seeking a motion to talk about time frame for revisiting the issue. And I would just like to say that from my perspective, even though I would support the motion for the current bylaw, from my perspective, it's not the end of the discussion on this. I would hate to see the topic completely disappear from our agenda. I would like to see us revisit it. I would like to see us have a more fulsome discussion about what resources would be required to make this happen. I don't think that we want to be seen as regressive or prohibiting a legal substance. I'm just very conscious about the effect it has on municipal business and on staff resources.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to just make a question of staff from a procedural basis. If I'm hearing the table here a little bit about wanting to not let this sit sort of indefinitely in the just rezoning and not coming back to it, whether it's a motion to direct staff on a time frame or to refer this to priority session, where in this process here should that happen? Is that, obviously we have a motion on the table on the floor right now, so that's sitting here. We'll deal with that. But is that after third reading, after adoption, if that's the choice of council, and or at a separate point in their new business in this?
So the matter before you is the bylaw, Your Worship, for approval, third and approval. Subsequent direction can be given to staff. Certainly, as we move into strategic planning, you will be discussing that in the context of department workloads as a whole. So your decision tonight is on the bylaw, staff's work plan and capacity, and when you direct staff to bring the item back for your consideration is your purview.
Okay, but it won't be part of this. We have to decide this first prior to move to getting to that discussion. Is where we're at. Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the table. Any further discussion? Councillor Zelka.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak a second time. I do note that sort of the way the law seems to be laid out, as pointed out by one of the speakers, that the local government is allowed to relax, but we cannot tighten. So the application of certain laws or provisions. Not relax, yes, tighten but not relax, thank you. Yes, the other way around. So, which unfortunately helps to encourage an approach of essentially a prohibition as a start, and then to relax as the community and as the opportunities come forward. So from that perspective, in terms of the way the laws are written, that's another approach that encourages me to vote in favor. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion on the table. So any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Green opposed. Thank you. And then we have need a motion for adoption.
I'll move adoption of bylaw 3531.103.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? One opposed. Councillor Green. Motion passes. Thank you very much. We also have bylaw, item number 13 on the agenda, third reading and adoption, subject to public hearing, bylaw 4717, which is the ticket information utilization amendment bylaw.
Is it just for adoption, or is it for third reading as well?
I believe it's for third reading and adoption.
My bad, for adoption.
It's just for adoption?
Just for adoption, I think.
It's written two different ways, different places. So
I'll move adoption of bylaw number 4717, ticket information utilization amendment bylaw.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are we allowed debate on an adoption motion? Yes. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you very much. So with that, we're going to go back to our regular scheduled agenda, which is item number 3 on the agenda, for those of you who are following at home. And I'll give a second to item number 3 is just mayor's remarks, of which there are very few.
Your Worship, sorry for interrupting. I wonder, one of the things Council talked about was referring this to a strategic priorities session to talk about.
Actually, let's deal with. We can deal with that as well at the same time. I was going to come back to it in a new business, but we can do it now.
I'll move that.
Second.
So let's get a clear motion here.
So, Your Worship, the motion would be to refer the issue of regulating cannabis to a strategic priority session to determine how that fits into the work program for staff.
To the next strategic priority session.
That's correct, which will be early in the new year.
Yeah, thank you.
So I move that.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Zelka.
Thank you. So a question relating to this motion, which, by the way, I will vote in favor of, as long as it doesn't preclude the potential creation of a temporary use permit regime. I mean, I imagine as part of this referral for this type of a mechanism, is it possible that that staff, in their proposals back to us, might that might possibly be one of the approaches suggested. I just wanted to know whether that was in the mix or not, or whether I would need to make a separate motion for that one.
Your Worship, we will present a number of options to you.
Okay, thank you, staff. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Thank you, staff. My mayor's remarks, there's not much. I just want to say thank you again for the staff for the work done to make the inauguration go so well. From my perspective, we've got had my first chaired my first police board meeting, and certainly been busy getting things, meeting with staff and with council in the run up to this. So I just want to appreciate everybody's support and help getting up to speed quickly. So item number 4, we have public participation period. This is a chance for members of the public, anybody in attendance, to come forward and speak to us on issues related to Oak Bay. Again, the same process that we had at the public hearing. If you were here for that, just state your name and your municipality of residence, and you'll have 3 minutes. Our procedures bylaw gives every individual 3 minutes to speak. We have a total of 20 minutes appointed for this section of the agenda. So if there's anybody in the audience who wishes to come and address council, please feel free to come forward. I'll ask again. Third time. All right. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to the agenda. We have item number 5, Provincial Urban Deer Cost Share Program Grant Application. And I'm going to give this to staff just to give a quick overview. Mr. Jones.
Your Worship, I think the report speaks for itself. The purpose of it is...
Sorry, before I let you go on, sorry, Councillor Appleton.
Sorry, I didn't know when to speak up. Yeah. Sorry. Your Worship, I'm going to declare a conflict of interest and recuse myself from the discussion. This pertains to funding being requested from the Ministry of Forest, Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development, who I am employed by. And although I have no role in reviewing or approving the funding in any way, I'd like to avoid the perception of any conflict of interest.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, now you can speak.
Sorry about that. I knew that was happening and I forgot. So the purpose of the report is to recommend that Council approve an application to the Provincial Urban Deer Cost Share Program in the amount of $31,655 to further implementation of the deer management program. And that program, as Council is aware, has been a partnership between the province and the district and the Urban Wildlife Stewardship Society that's been ongoing for a couple of years. And we're making good progress. Different people have different views on that, I know. But from a staff's perspectives, we are making very good progress. And the UWSS has been an incredible partner in this process. The deadline for this application is November 15th. And so it is very, very tight. And this has happened over the last few years, actually. The suggestion here is that our funding request is actually for an additional $11,655, which means there would be an $11,655 additional contribution by the district. And if, I say if, because we're not sure, if the province were to match that, there would be an additional $11,655 contribution from the province. What that means, and we've kind of, we pay attention, believe it or not, to things that are kind of going along in elections and that type of thing. And I think we've heard in the community that there's an interest in trying to advance how we deal with the deer issue in our community. So the additional funding would allow us to advance that process. So again, the request is to approve this application to the province. Ms. Kilpatrick is here from the UWSS if the people have specific questions about the application or details, and I will do my best to try to respond as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jones. And again, we're dealing here specifically with the application for for the grant, but of course that ties into broader questions as well. So are there questions of council, of the applicant or staff? Councillor Ney?
To the applicant, through you, Mayor, can I talk with the...
Yes, Ms.
Yeah.
Kirkpatrick, why don't you come forward?
Hi.
It's the tall microphone. I know we haven't yet activated that little microphone. Oh,
Jason Fisher here tonight.
thank you.
So thank you for this report, and the other very extensive report. That's very helpful and thorough. And so here's my question: is in coming forward to fund more, I'm in principle supportive of this. My question really has to do with if we're funding for the ability to apply the immunocontraception to an additional 40 does, and I'm sure you've got this number somewhere in that other report, but what percent of the total number of does do you expect that will deal with? And could you just give us some more information about if we do that and we don't do the remaining deer, what does that do in terms of the total program's effectiveness? Do you understand what I'm asking? It was a bit of a rambling question.
I think I do, but I'm going to
okay.
hand that over to
Okay.
Dr. Fisher. He'd be more qualified to answer that. Sorry.
Dr. Fisher, welcome.
Thank you so much. May I repeat back the question so I'm sure that I'm answering the right one? Are you asking me what is the anticipated effectiveness of doing the original 40 versus the proposed 80 versus all the deer?
Yeah, that's actually it.
Okay. First of all, if we don't, under the current proposal, we wouldn't have the logistical and monetary capacity to do all of the deer. We don't know how many deer there are, but we're pretty sure we don't have the capacity to do all of them. So we originally proposed 40 based on the original budget, and then we think that with the additional amount that we can get to 80. So 80 is basically a best guess at this stage that represents what we think is probably the majority of does in Oak Bay. Now, we won't know that for sure until the final report comes out in December when we have a reliable population estimate. That's the point of doing the research, is that so we have some confidence to come back to you and say 80 is half the does, or it's 3/4, or it's 7/8, or something like that. But at this point, we're making a guess because we have to move forward in advance of having that information. We wouldn't be proposing it if we didn't think that there was some remote chance of this being fairly effective. So if it does represent the majority of does as we think it does, then it stands to have a very high probability of having an effective population response on Oak Bay deer.
Okay, thank you. Good.
That's, Councillor Patterson and then Councillor Braithwaite.
Just a question to you, Chair. I think perhaps more to staff, though. If we apply for the funding, what's the time frame for finding out whether the application is approved and we get the funding?
They don't give you a specific time frame, but it's they move fairly quickly. Like I think we would know very early in the new year if we were successful.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any other questions? Councillor Braithwaite and Councillor Zelka.
Thanks. I have a lot of questions, so I'll probably break it into two. But thank you for coming back, Dr. Fisher. It was a great presentation that you gave last time, so thank you very much for actually coming back and talking to us again. So first question is, I know that last time you were here, Ms. Kilpatrick, you talked, I think it was Mayor Murdoch who asked about budget, and you said that the staff had the budget from last year, but I don't know, staff, I'm sorry, but I should have asked prior whether or not we had some information about budget from last year.
Mr. Jones?
So, Your Worship, the I'm going to give it this kind of a general. So the district committed $20,000. The province committed $20,000. That money from the district's perspective has been spent. The other thing that has happened is that we've had donations from others to the tune of, we anticipate about $8,000 that we were keeping in a little bit of a separate kitty to help out with funding the program.
So I'm sorry, but does the UWSS not have to report back on how that money was spent?
Your Worship, yes, they do, and we have to report to the province, and we did that last year, and we provided that information to council, and we will provide that to you again. We have a very detailed report that we have to prepare.
Because I'd like to see that, just because I'm really unsure of exactly how that money was spent. So I have, my next question would be, if the province doesn't give us the $11,655 extra, then, and we've approved the $11,655 extra, does that mean we get that $11,655 back?
Your Worship, that would be a decision for council. So what we would do is come back to you and say, we applied for $31,655. We only got 20, or we only got 25. What do you want to do? That would be a council decision. But you need to, if you're going to apply for those matching funds, we need to be able to say that we have made those available.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So, Dr. Fisher, a deer, the natural lifespan of a doe would be 9 to 10 years in the wild, correct?
We actually don't know, because so little research has been done on this, especially under wild conditions, but 9 to 10 would be an average, and then maximum somewhere around probably 14 or so.
Yeah, in captivity, something like 14 to 17 or
something
like that.
Or just a really good doe.
So how many times in that span, so let's say average 14, because they're in a good place in Oak Bay, how many times in that span would they have to get inoculated with the contraception?
So for this to be effective, they have to be inoculated yearly, right?
Well, the efficacy is actually approximately 22 months. So.
Okay.
And again, that's something that needs to be determined.
Yeah.
Okay, so it could be yearly. So okay. Yes.
May I add to that?
Go ahead, please do.
When I said, trying to get the number in my head. Excuse me. Can I have a glass of water?
I can also, while you're drinking that, perhaps you can clarify the difference between the need for additional boosters or additional double shots like we're doing this year as well, because I think there's a difference between those two in future years.
So in every year that the inoculation is given, it has to be delivered once, and then 2 weeks later. Between 2 and 6 weeks later, there has to be a follow-up. So this isn't my area of expertise. This is actually the wildlife veterinarian on staff. He's the pro on how this works, so I'm just repeating back information given to me. And I need to qualify my previous statement in that the first year that the immunization is given, if it's boosted, then that has a high success rate, I think, of 75 to 80% or something like this, and all the actual numbers are in the report. Right. So I'm just ballparking. And then in the second year, if you don't do anything, that deer does not have a 100% success rate of reproducing like an untreated doe does. Their success rate, even left untreated for that second year, drops. If you hit it again with that immunization, then it won't reproduce in that second year. And if you don't hit it again in the third year, then its success rate drops even lower. In other words, if you hit it once, twice, then the probability of that deer breeding in the third, fourth, fifth year is very, very low. If you want to drive that down closer to zero, you could hit it a third time. But my understanding is that that's sort of, you only need to hit it probably 3 years in a row in order to get that reproductive capacity down.
Okay, so I think I understand that. So then you said that you have to give them a booster within 2 to 6 weeks after they're darted. So if they don't get that booster within 2 to 6 weeks of being originally darted, does that then make the original dart null and void?
No. So if you give them a single shot, then the probability, you want to feel this one?
I think a single shot, the efficacy is around 72%, and then with the booster, it goes up into the low 90s.
Yeah.
Okay. And how long is the window that you're allowed to dart for?
So the best, you have to dart before the rutting season.
Right.
The provincial veterinarian, Dr. Helen Schwanche, does not recommend that you go out in the heat. So, for instance, this summer would have been, even if we'd had the permit going out in August would have been not possible because it was so hot. So presuming that the temperature goes down, you start at the beginning of September, you need to do it before the rut. So the regional biologist has said that you want to kind of back it up. The rut, there's no hard date that the rut starts, and it's different in different locations. So assuming that the rut starts usually at the beginning of November, late October, early November, you back it up a week or so. So we would, the application for the permit is for up to the 3rd week in October. So that gives us about a 7-week window. And if the weather is cool in the summer, we can go out a little bit earlier and extend that window.
Okay, so that's interesting to me because in my head, here's how I work out the math for that. If you have, according to your report, it takes 4 hours approximately to do 1 deer.
It's an estimate.
If you're looking at doing 80 deer, so that's 4 times 80 is 320 hours. So based on a 37.5-hour work week, that would be about 8.5 weeks. Well, you just told me that there's only 7 weeks, a window of 7 weeks, and that 8.5 weeks would be just to get the original dart done. Then you would have to go back and you would have to do those 80 does again with the redart. So then you're adding another 2 to 6 weeks. So I just don't see how the math can work out for darting 80 deer.
So the time frame of 7 to 8.5 weeks is approximate, dependent upon the weather and so on.
Speaking to the microphone a bit more. Thanks.
But also, there's we have a tagging system. So we've developed the experts have developed a tagging system. So when you dart those first deer, they get a tag in their ear, and then you track those deer so that you know when their first 2 weeks is up. And so as you're out there, you can tell this one was darted X amount of time ago, and sort of keep it rolling that way. The 4 hours per deer, we've been out.
Includes the double shot.
Yeah, that includes the double shot,
Yeah.
right? And so for the booster shot, we don't have to sedate them, so that's not a question of sedating. The booster shot is just a clear shot, so there's not the same process of sedation and a reversal drug and so on. Does that you want to add to that?
Yeah. So it takes us about 4 hours to locate, successfully dart, and then bring down and then process a deer and collar a deer for research. But we're not doing all of that. All we're doing is delivering the shot and putting a tag in the ear and then letting the animal back up again. And so it takes about half the time.
Sorry, I thought in the report that it said you were actually going to do some blood work and some other work on the deer as well.
Yeah, if the province wants us to, but that's a very small amount of work compared to what we're doing right now with collaring the deer.
And then when you tag the deer on the ear, then if you have to go back and re-dart that deer, how do you find that deer? Because they could be elusive, let's face it.
Yeah, they certainly can. Yeah. So that is definitely going to be a challenge.
Right.
Right now what we do is we drive around and we look for deer that are in a reasonable spot that we can dart and then capture successfully. What we found is that we've gotten pretty good at identifying where the deer are going to be and when. We also have the huge amount of camera data that we have been collecting over the past several months that is going to give us very good information about where the deer are and when all across Oak Bay, so in addition to our own anecdotal data. So what we will have in hand when we do this is actual information about where the deer are, which is what we didn't have when we started the coloring process and we had to make it up from scratch. And so we're fairly confident that we can hit the right places at the right times.
Actually, I'll ask one more question and I'll let someone else go on.
Can I just add to that as well? That the process of going out and doing the boostering, we're really hopeful that we'll have the cooperation of the community. There's a lot of interest in this, and we've already experienced when we're out there doing the capture and collaring, and when we've been redeploying the collars for some of the mortalities that have occurred, that we get a lot of input from the community. There's a deer here, there's a deer here, and we would be making an effort to communicate with the community, probably through flyers in their. So when we dart the deer, when we dart a doe, give her the vaccine, that area might get a flyer saying, "Please keep your eyes open for whatever colored tag is in their ear," and that will help as well.
Actually, I'm going to change my question because I'm going to ask the other question later. But that brings up a point that I have to say I was troubled by part of the information that I read in your report, and what troubled me was kind of the sweeping statements where you make assumptions that. I'll give you an example. It says. Whether in favor of reducing the deer population or not, it is widely believed that given a choice between lethal and non-lethal means of deer reduction, most residents would choose non-lethal method. And I'm wondering where you get that, what you base that on. I mean, if it's just on hearsay, because I could turn around and say that hearsay from knocking on doors throughout the whole process of the election, I heard the exact opposite. But so I'd like to know if you have any hard data or what scientific approach you use to get that data.
Well, we tried to get the scientific data because what really needs to happen to get that information is a values-based survey. And we wanted to do that in Oak Bay, but that did not occur. So there is no way of having that hard data. We did that in Esquimalt, and the information that we got back from that definitely gave us that information. So yes, it is a sweeping statement. It's probably based to a certain degree anecdotally, but that was in our original application, and it has stayed in there. It's not really part of the data.
Yeah, I just, as I say, I just get bothered when I read that 6 or 7 times throughout the report where there's statements like that are not based on scientific data. But I'll let the next person go and come back to
we'll
the
try
rest
and
of my
get to
questions.
the question of the grant application here as well. Is there any other comments or questions? Councillor Zelka. Sorry, I had you down and I didn't call you right away.
Thank you so much, Chair. Appreciate you noticing me. That's great. So the first question, I'll start with staff, and then stay close. With respect to the First Nations consultation, I see in the report that Chief Ron Sam, on behalf of their nation, have already provided a letter stating that they support the immunocontraceptive program and that it is the appropriate way to manage the deer population. And I'm quoting Chief Ron Sam in your report. Could you please share with us, the status of the 5 First Nations consultations and where we're at, please?
Your Worship, I think Ms. Kilpatrick's in a better situation to provide that input.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for that. We have been informed from by the ministry that the application meets all of the technical and scientific requirements. The only outstanding issue is the First Nations consultation. The consultations with the First Nations had to be initiated by the province and concluded by the province, and they did that starting on September 21st. Oak Bay did receive the letter from Chief Ron Sam. There are 4 other nations. All have been contacted by the province. They don't have the answers necessarily back from that yet, but they are fulfilling their obligation to do that, and we have been assured that we have met we have done due diligence, we have continued, and we will continue. This is a very foundational thing to consult with the First Nations, so we certainly going forward will be continuing that dialogue, but we have done everything that we can to reach out to the First Nations, and at this point the province has assured us, the ministry has assured us that the permit will be in hand by the end of this calendar year.
Thank you. If I may continue, Chair?
Please.
I understand that if this new requirement didn't come forward, that we would have done the immunocontraceptive, the first course for the 40 does before the rut that had just occurred, but that was held up as a result of this late requirement.
Yes, we weren't informed of this requirement until quite late in the application process.
Thank you. One more question related to this. I know the timing with respect to reconciliation and this very important process that we go through with the province in partnership, of course. If we don't get an answer back from the other 4 First Nations, will that in any way prevent us from starting at the next, previous to the next route?
No, the province, the situation with the province is by reaching out and by we have the endorsement from Chief Ron Sam on behalf of the Council of the Songkees. And for the others, there could be some overlap there's discussion around overlapping of the land and so, but generally it is felt that the Oak Bay falls on Songkees land. The other nations, it is up to them. They have been reached out to. If they have any issues with it, then they are in a position to be able to, they're being given substantial opportunity to communicate that. So from the province's standpoint, they feel that this will be, that all of the criteria will have been met very shortly.
Okay, if I may go on with a few other questions. I understand that the drug is to be delivered via DART as opposed to a capture and a netting type, which was the process that we talked about years ago. And that will, I believe, speed up the whole process with respect to delivery of the immunocontraceptive and possibly allow 80 to be eventually treated. If you could please comment on the whole darting mechanism, and possibly, I understand through that process we can also mark the animal for later identification.
Okay.
Somebody has to ask the question. It doesn't matter who.
Thank you for the question. You've pretty much answered it yourself. So the process is very much like the coloring process, in that we have a dart projector, that fires a tranquilizer and hits the deer. The deer goes down. We administer the contraceptive and then tag the deer, and the deer comes up. In our second round, we don't have to tag the deer, which means we don't have to bring the deer down, and so we can use a dart projector to fire the booster shot.
Wonderful. Speeding the whole process.
Yeah.
Excellent. If I may continue, please. So it sounds like I'm imagining you have fairly high confidence at administering 80 doses in the window that's being provided.
We have very high confidence in administering up to 80 doses.
Up to 80.
Right. So, I mean, it really depends on what the population of Oak Bay deer is and how many does are out there to be darted and where they are. Sure. And we really don't know that at this time. I will say that from my experience, spending a lot of time in Oak Bay looking for deer over the last several months, I keep seeing our collared deer over and over and over and over again. If I see a group of 5 deer, one of them is my collared deer. That says to me that when you have a recite rate that high, that tells me that you don't actually have nearly as many deer as you think you do. And so it could be that population of does might actually be lower than 80. We just don't know at this point. But we wanted to ask for 80 and then try to do as close to 80 as we possibly could as a starting place based on our best guesstimate.
Okay, thank you.
Is that a fair answer?
Yes, it is.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to touch, I guess that this question probably has to go back to staff with respect to PUDAC. I understand we had membership on PUDAC, and with the change in mayor...
I'm attending the meeting next week.
Oh, do we still have our membership, or...?
Yep, I've been invited, so I guess we do.
Fantastic. That I don't need to say anymore. I appreciate that. So then the last question I'll have has to do with the methods of deer control that are potentially available to us in the province of British Columbia. I understand, and please confirm for me, that translocation, or the moving of a deer from one district to another part of the province, maybe even another country, that is not allowed. Is this true?
Right now, under the PUDAC process, the PUDAC application form, there's 2 components. There's operational and there's research. And the only one under operational is culling, which does need to be done annually to have an effect. It needs to be done year after year. And there's no 3-year sort of, now we've dealt with it. It would be ongoing. There are 2 that are being... that are the 2 that come under the other component of the application, which is research. One is the immunocontraception that Oak Bay is doing. The other is translocation, which is being done in the interior. It's either Invermere or Cranbrook.
Yeah.
Can't remember which one. Yeah, and the jury is out on the success of that in those areas because the deer are coming back. The translocated deer are coming back. Some of them are experiencing mortality because they're not used to being out in the wild where there are cougars and so on. But the reality is those areas in the interior, there are places to take those deer. There's nowhere to take them from here. And if you take them to another community, if you take them anywhere else in Vancouver Island, you're just creating a problem for somebody else. And that problem actually probably, if they considered it a problem, is already in existence. So the distance that would have to be traveled for translocation just doesn't make it a viable option here on Vancouver Island.
Can I add to that? May I add to that? There's also a growing worry about transmission of disease with translocation, that if some of these deer do happen to be diseased and they're moved and then put into another place where there's an undiseased but receptive population, that the spread of that disease would be facilitated by translocation. So translocation currently is a highly controversial mode of deer management in British Columbia for those, I think, good reasons.
Almost done. Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to just touch upon during the election, I had a chance to speak with a number of other councillors, and potential councillors and mayors in other areas, in Esquimalt and Saanich and Victoria. And it sounded like, and I'd like your opinion, maybe some work that you might be doing in this area, it sounded like these other nearby districts, towns, cities are actually looking at a similar approach that Oak Bay is moving forward with in a rather and I know Esquimalt, it seems to be fairly far along. It sounds like the mayor of Saanich is quite interested in this approach. If you could maybe speak to that in terms of what might happen at a regional level. Yes.
If we can get to the theoretical questions quickly, maybe as a short answer.
So the work that we're doing in Esquimalt is we ran a values-based survey in Esquimalt, got a 47% return rate. The survey, values-based survey, doesn't say, do you want to do this or do you want to do that? It's another form of collecting data. Where do you see the deer? How do you feel about the deer? Are they in your yard? How do you feel when you drive? And so on. Based on the results of that survey, they engaged in public education, which is a really key component, and to many of the issues that come up and to many of the frustrations that a lot of people on the doorstep might talk about. Public education is just huge. It doesn't really get addressed in the PUDAC application. That is something that each community is responsible for on their own, and it's separate, and it does require funding. So that's probably a future conversation. We would really like to work more hand in hand with Oak Bay on the public education piece, because a lot of time it's just about understanding what the options are and understanding more about deer behavior and how to reduce human-deer conflict. I've strayed off. In Esquimalt, they then have asked us to do public education, so we've done a fairly rigorous program of that in Esquimalt, and they are doing three annual deer counts. So the second one is just winding up now. This is a very robust, science-based, evidence-based deer count. So after they do it next year, they will have a fairly good handle on the numbers and the trends in Esquimalt, and they'll be able to use that to inform any future decisions that they make, and they will be looking closely at what's been happening in Oak Bay to determine that.
How are they funding it?
The Esquimalt Council funds it.
So it's not getting a grant through PUDAC?
Nope.
It's
no,
being funded
they're
by
being funded by the
municipality.
municipality. Yeah.
And if you could just touch them on maybe Saanich or Victoria, have any
Victoria asked us to do a presentation a year and a half ago, which we did, which was received well. They've not made any decisions to do anything about deer management at this point. My understanding is the same as yours in Saanich. They're very much in favor of pursuing programs similar to what we are doing here. However, the research that's being done here is key. There's really only one community. The only way that immunocontraception will become a viable option is if the research is done to the level that it's being done here. This is where Oak Bay really is standing up and leading the way, because somebody has to do, for IC to become viable, somebody has to do the research, and Oak Bay is.
Well, when Councillor Green was talking about how it'd be nice for Oak Bay to be more proactive, I see this as an area where we have a wonderful opportunity to actually leap ahead and possibly lead the way in the province in terms of a viable approach to deer control. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Braithwaite.
Yeah, I just have two other things to say. Just a quick question. You collared 20 deer, but 5, I believe in your report, say were killed that were collared. So how did that affect the data that you were collecting?
So we redeployed those collars on other deer.
Okay, good. So
Yeah. So we have a full complement of deer with collars roaming around that landscape right now.
good.
So while it abbreviates our data set for one animal, we just pick it up with another animal.
Thank you.
And then, so I struggle with this because last year we thought we were going to be able to give the immunocontraception to 40 deer. We weren't. That gave us a whole other season where we're going to see a big increase in population of deer. What is the assurance that we're going to get the permit to do this for next year?
I've just been speaking with the ministerial staff, and they have assured us that we'll have the permit by the end of this calendar year.
I think that's the same thing we heard last year, though. So I don't mean to be disrespectful or anything, but that's an answer that
Perhaps
I've heard
I can
before.
ask reframe that question a little bit differently. Is there anything? Just maybe you don't have to answer this as a question, but I think there's a strong desire to make sure this happens in 2019. So we are at your service. If there's anything we can do to help with that process as a council or a staff to build those bridges to the ministry or at a political level, then please let us help, because I think there's a strong feeling that we need to have this approved and that permit in place.
To that point, I think the consultation with the First Nations, we were not informed of that until, as I mentioned, well into the process. So that was on the province. Actually, that was something that needed to happen and didn't happen, and it was actually at that point that we came to council and asked for help. We asked for the mayor at the time to take it up the level, and that happened. And so we feel very confident that that's, the technical aspects have been approved. The First Nation consultation has occurred. There's really nothing else left to be sorted out. We've had an assurance from the province that we will get the permit, and we don't foresee this kind of delay happening again.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Zulke, you wanted to add something else?
Yes, Mayor, maybe in answer to your question, it's very heartening that you're on PUDAC. So that with that access to provincial staff and provincial senior management will only help move this process forward. So fantastic that we're on that our Oak Bay is a member of that group. Thank you.
Okay. I still want to get to this as a grant piece, because actually we have a biologist here. I'd like to have us involved in the ultimate discussion on this, but we can't until we get past the grant piece. So I guess I had one quick question to add on to this, and just for my clarification, we were 2 months, month and a half ago, ready to go on the thing, and we didn't do that. So are there funds left over? Like, I'm assuming there are funds that were approved for doing that work. If I look at the numbers, the added numbers for 40 deer is about $32,000. Do we have like sort of an equivalent amount of leftover that we didn't spend?
Those funds have been, they've been spoken for. They've already been, what's the word I'm looking for? They've
allocated?
Allocated, thank you. They've already been allocated, so they're for the research component, which is ongoing.
Okay. I think we have to, again, having those detailed financial information would be very helpful. Councillor Braithwaite?
Just for the research, they wouldn't be for the actual darting and the fellow who's going to do that, whoever that is, I can't remember his name.
The veterinarian. The number of the funds were used for the capture and collaring and for purchasing of the vaccine and so on. But so some of it was allocated for that and has been spent on that, and others of it will be used going forward, and the rest of it is for the research.
Okay, thank you. We have a report in front of us with a recommendation to make the application for the grant. Councillor Green?
I'm going to move the recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Braithwaite?
I would love to be able to vote for this, but I honestly don't think I can, only because I think that from everything that I've heard, that doesn't come out in your report. And even last night I was at a function where there was at least 4 people who live in Oak Bay who are concerned about what's going to happen with the increased population of deer in Oak Bay, and they don't feel that this is the right road to go down. They're looking at another method of deer management, and I wouldn't disagree with them. I worry that what happened last year could possibly happen again next year, and if we get another year behind where we don't have those deer inoculated with the birth control, we're going to have another boom in the number of deer that we have here. I would really like to press us to look at some other method of deer management that perhaps isn't this, and I think that the bulk, if I can use some of your supposition from your report, that I'm going to say that the bulk of the residents of Oak Bay would be behind me on that. I think that, in your report you talk about effective deer management program and the wish to live in unison with nature, and I don't believe that those are co-equal. I think we have to have the first, but that we're hoping to achieve the second, and I hope we can achieve the second, but I'm not sure if this is the exact way to do it. So I'm going to be voting against it. I'm quite sure it's going to move forward based on the conversation sitting around the table, but I just feel that in good conscience, I have to vote against it. So, but thank you very much for all of the information that you brought forward.
Thank you. Am I allowed to comment on that since that was directed this way, or not? Is that
No,
time
no,
passed?
no. Time's passed. If there's a question, I'll let you answer it. But I think we're at the decision-making process here. There's a motion on the table. I'm just looking at any other comments before we vote. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few things I would like to say about this program. First of all, this is a three-way partnership with the province. I think Oak Bay has been fortunate to find a group like the Urban Wildlife Stewardship Society to work with. I compliment staff for the hard work they've done in making this partnership work. It's a three-way, obviously. So the municipality has put an effort in, UWSS and the province. And I think that's a great way forward. I think it also demonstrates leadership on the part of Oak Bay, that we're doing something that's groundbreaking. We could be producing groundbreaking research that will be a model for other communities, not only on Vancouver Island, but across the province. That's my understanding, and possibly elsewhere in Canada and North America. I think, Dr. Fisher, if I'm correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so I frankly am grateful to the volunteers that have put in hundreds of hours of work on this project. I'm sorry about the fact that the program couldn't get started this past fall. However, I'm very hopeful that you will be starting and will get the permit by the end of the year. And I think I agree with Councillor Braithwaite. We can't afford to have another failed start or a failed launch. It would be difficult. I think the one issue that I am concerned about, a lot of people thought last summer, people being the public in Oak Bay, they thought that the inoculations had already occurred. I think we need to be really careful about how we communicate with the public and message the public on this issue. I agree with you, Ms. Kilpatrick, that public education is key, and strategic communications as part of that is also key. So I just want to encourage everybody involved, all the partners, but particularly the local partners. We must be careful with our messaging so that the public is kept informed and fully understand at what point we are along the way. So that would be my only recommendation. Thank you.
All right. Motion on the floor. Councillor Zalka. Speak to the motion.
Yeah, speaking in favor of the motion, just wanted to point out that if we don't proceed with this motion and we change horses, shall we say, I just hearken back to 4 or 5 years ago when through using only government resources through the CRD and through Oak Bay, $274,000 was spent, if I recall correctly, without no volunteers. It was all basically staff resources primarily, and the cost of the actual hunter. And at the end of that process, after, by the way, the mayor of the day's house was, how do I say this, protested outside the front door, and in a public demonstration, very un-Oak Bay-ish, but on the other hand, it was quite a clear demonstration of the public's sentiment. And I refer to the public in the regional sense. There may be a few people at the door who have an idea of what needs to be done. But with respect to the practicalities, I think it's important for us to be responsible as leaders in the community to reflect what we're hearing at the doorstep with what actually can and cannot be done in a responsible and cost-effective way. If we did change horses, I don't really want to see another $274,000 spent simply to get 11 deer, with only 4 of them female. That was absolutely what I considered unacceptable, although the mayor of the day called it a success and then said in the next breath, let's do it again. At that point, it was like, I think we need to try a better way. And I am just absolutely so incredibly thankful that all these incredible number of Oak Bay residents, most, if not all, are retired. No, not all. Many are retired.
Young people involved.
And thankfully young people are getting involved as well from a crowdsourcing perspective. But I was just very impressed at the incredible wellspring of experience and knowledge that we can draw upon here within this district of ours. Harkening back to the engagement perspective, this is just a sort of an approach taken that I would love to see emulated in terms of some of the other many things that we need to do in the district, and in terms of relying in a constructive, structured way to move forward. And thank you through the chair to these volunteers, in many cases volunteers, who have done so much work and have saved us, frankly, so much money to try and move forward on this issue.
So you're speaking in favor?
I am, of course, speaking in favor. The last point I wanted to make is that more people were knocked down by large dogs than were knocked down by deer. Surprise, surprise. And yet I don't see the people at the door saying we've got to take out the deer. I just that there's obviously different perspectives. I also noted that there are more than twice as many injuries from raccoons as there are from deer. Raccoons, thankfully, are treated as a rodent, and they don't have the kind of legal protections that a deer have. So there's things we can do in other areas, but unfortunately, the province is handcuffing us to certain perspectives that we have to take here at the local government. So I'll be voting in favor. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? I'll get to that in a second. Anything? I would like to get to the question of getting to the grant, and I believe the large number you cite was actually the regional work required as a baseline for us to do this work. Even it was required a regional wildlife management study to do anything. With nothing to do with the cull. It was just to do with wildlife management. Period. We weren't allowed to touch them until we did that. So that's I don't think it's an entirely unfair assessment of the cost. But Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. I was going to say that actually the cull cost Oak Bay $16,000, and the rest was something different. And I think that you might cite that there's more injuries from raccoons, but that's only reported injuries. I think that anecdotally, there are more attacks by deer and injuries from deer in our municipality that just aren't reported. And I think that you talk about raccoons being rodents. I think that deer are probably just cute rodents. That's all.
I don't think we're going to resolve that issue, but we do have a grant application in front of us, so I think I'm ready to call the question here. All those in favor of the grant application? All those opposed? Councillor Braithwaite opposed. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming here today. And could Mr. Anderson, would you grab Councillor Appleton out of the room?
Thank you.
Or just ask him, invite him back. If you just wake him up and bring him back in. All right, so I'm going to move on here to some minutes. Advisory Design Panel minutes of September the 4th. Looking for a motion to receive. Moved?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Heritage Commission minutes of September 11th. Looking for motion to receive. Move
Motion
receipt.
to receive.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. We have no additional, I should better check that. Do we have any additional Correspondence for upcoming? Get to my. No. Okay. New business and reports from other committees. First up, we have new business. Is there any new business to bring forward?
I just can I do a notice of motion here?
You may do a notice of motion here as the appropriate spot.
I'd just like to give a notice of motion in regards to something I want to bring forward in regards to council times. So maybe looking at the start of meeting times, etc.
Okay. Good. Thank you. All right. Any other new business? I just, there's a couple of things, similarly, just a notice of motion. One of which is just and I think I'll just do this as a notice of motion, nothing else, but one is just to consider requesting of staff to bring back some recommendations for standardizing our procedures bylaw around public hearings. We don't actually have that in our procedures bylaw, and I think it's very worthwhile, so we have some more consistency on that. And I'd also like to bring back a couple of small items related to elections, both mail-in ballot times and possibly reconsidering some clarification of the signed bylaws that we have. But I'll just give notice right now. I won't be doing anything here at this table. After new business, we have a report on the Capital Regional District. Nothing to report. We have orientation training in our first meeting on tomorrow. And other verbal reports, for those of you who are new, this is where councillors are welcome to kind of bring back to this table any information that might be of interest to council or to the public. So if you're sitting on other committees or commissions or regional bodies, this is a chance for you to bring back those reports of things that have gone on at those meetings. So it's early, but if there's anybody here who wishes to speak to anything, Councillor Green?
I just have a question on reporting out. If we want to do an annual report at the end of each year on our committee work, is that also agreeable?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Braithwaite?
I just want to remind everybody that the Parks, Recreation and Culture has the Carnarvon plan, Carnarvon Park Master Plan that they're looking at. And so if anybody wants to give feedback, they can go online and do that. I believe that the boards are still up at the rec center, I think. Yeah. So you can also give feedback in that way as well. So I encourage everyone to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Anything else? Saying none? All right. I know it's early. We shouldn't have that much to do yet. Bylaw Memorandum. Item number 10, Bylaw 4714, Streets and Traffic Amendment Bylaw. I guess I'll go to Mr. Anderson or Mr. Haran for this an update. We've had this before. So this is we've had 3 motions at this point, correct? So we're just looking at a motion to adopt is the recommended piece here.
That's correct, Your Worship.
Please, Councillor Braithwaite.
If I have a question on this, is it more proper to wait till after the adoption, or wait till after the motion to adopt?
Let's have the motion. Let's have a conversation now.
So I'll move to adopt.
We have a motion.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Question, Councillor Braithwaite?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I know we've asked staff on numerous occasions to ask them, this group, to give us money towards bike racks, and I'm just wondering if that's been done, and if it has, if there was any appetite for them to give us money for something like that. I mean, they're not paying a business license, they're not paying any taxes, so I think that was the reasoning behind us wanting staff to ask.
Mr. Haran, and I have a comment on this as well. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So, yes, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Braithwaite, so this was raised in discussion a couple times in previous council meetings and committees of the whole, and in each of those occasions, the staff recommendation was to take it as a what we're looking to do first is step 1, amend the bylaw to enable a business such as these bike share operators to operate in Oak Bay, which is what's in front of you tonight. And then step 2 was to start a 1-year trial period with a particular business to see, to work out what the details of the arrangements, whether they work for us or they need to be tweaked and so on. And some of the things in the detail include where can the bikes be parked and how often and how quickly, what's the level of service around responsiveness to moving bikes if they're in the wrong place and so on. So the staff recommendation at the time was to wait further into the year and as part of the more permanent agreement discuss requirements around infrastructure changes if any
Thank you. And I had this discussion with staff because this has been my bugbear in the past. So one of the suggestions was that we can post this motion. We could make a motion that staff be directed to draft a permit under a license category and fee for bike share businesses for council consideration to reflect the costs of that service. So that if the council is interested in addressing those costs, it's probably most appropriate to pass this and then direct staff to bring forward a fee structure after that is approved. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you. Through you, Chair, just a question for staff on this program. I guess I'm curious as to how do we determine the success of the program? Like, what makes this, how do we know if it's a good program, a bad program, or we should have someone else's program?
It's probably more our Polyric than staff's, but staff, I'll give you a chance to answer that question.
Certainly, through your worship, I think that's a good question, actually, and a little bit of it was discussed in the previous council when the company first arrived at a committee of the whole to start talking about this in general, and I think that part of it is basically there will be some requirements where the agreement says that the company is supposed to behave in a certain way. In terms of the bylaw changes will allow the bikes to be in certain places and allow customers to use the bikes in a certain way. But if the company, for example, I don't want to put them under the bus right now, because I just say if a potential operator doesn't follow the agreement for a period of time, then that would be an unsuccessful trial. And I think a good chunk of the trial is not whether it's going to be success or lack of success. It'll be feedback from residents, feedback from the council about how to tweak the arrangement so that businesses like that operate in the district operate in a way that's that matches more the community's expectations. So, for example, maybe there's places where we want to say that the bikes shouldn't be left. Maybe there's places that we want them to respond more quickly when we give them the call to say move those bikes from that area, things like that. So that'll be some of the feedback that we'll get. I would suspect that we would have a discussion at a committee of the whole level where I would bring back a report to say here's what we've observed in 8 months or a specific period of time of them operating, and then we could take the community's feedback at that time to tweak the longer term arrangement.
Councillor Zelka?
Thank you. A question through you to staff. The report suggests that this is going to run for approximately a year, a pilot, and the bylaw specifically makes reference to provision to the municipality of aggregate or anonymized data relating to the operation of the bike share system, default, and termination. I imagine at the end of that pilot process, the report, when we get this data, that'll be included in the results to help us determine the success, or not?
Through you, Chair, I don't know precisely that that's true, but it makes sense to me that it would. So part of one of the good examples of doing a trial is you able to access the data of where the users typically pick up the bikes, where they drop them off, and that would inform some smart decisions about where the bikes should be stationed, where they should be, where potential bike racks might go, things that where you can see the behavior of the customers, and that will shape potentially some of the community's feedback on the longer term agreement.
So I'm imagining then whatever report comes back will include some of this data. That's I'm imagining.
I would say that the report, through Chair, that because I probably would be the one writing that report, would try to incorporate whatever data we can have access to make good decisions on it.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton, welcome back.
Through you, Chair, question to staff. I understand that this particular operator is considering going to a format where they're going to going to virtual parking stations, or essentially limiting the amount of they don't want the bicycle sort of in any location, but they're sort of transitioning to a model where they would like people to drop them in more centralized locations. So I guess I'm just wondering, is that something that we would also, it seems to be implicit in what's in the staff report, but that would also be something that we would have some approval over, correct?
Mr. Horan?
Through you, Chair, I think that we would. My understanding, and I don't have the specifics of which municipality, but my understanding is in the other places where this company is trialing it with municipalities, they've already received feedback about what they'd like to see, and so that's tweaked, and they're all in trial mode with those as well. So that would be our aim as well. If we see something in the first period of time that doesn't work, then we'll tweak that, and the draft agreement that covers for the trial is meant to offer some flexibility to allow us to change those things.
All good. All right. We have a motion for adoption on the table. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Unopposed? Is there anybody who wishes to ask staff to bring forward some fees?
I will ask staff to bring forward some information on fees for this.
Perhaps I would ask Ms. Varela, we chat about this, to read aloud a suitable motion for us to consider. Do you have something handy?
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff would recommend that Council consider the following: that staff be directed to draft a permit and/or license category and fee for bike share businesses for Council's consideration that reflects the costs to the district for providing the necessary infrastructure and enforcement related to this potential new business category.
I move that.
We have a mover. Do we have a second? Moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Zelka?
On maybe a parallel aspect with respect to existing situations in Oak Bay, we have car share already available in Oak Bay. Is there a similar permit process that has to be paid for car share, or are there costs to the district with respect to that type of a business, please?
My apologies, Your Worship. I don't have that information at my fingertips, but I'd be happy to bring it back to the Council table.
I can speak to one, which is a parking spot opposite the Monterey Centre, and they do pay a rent for that space. Yeah. All right, I have a motion on the table. I guess I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Zelka opposed. Thank you. And we move on then to item number 11. And 12. These are the adoption of the fire prevention and life safety bylaws. And I don't believe the fire chief's here anymore, so we will just, if there's questions, we may not be able to answer them. I think we probably can. So we've gone through first, second, and third reading. This is just the motions for adoption. Those of you who were around the table earlier would know them. Those of you who don't, feel free to ask questions as you see fit. So we have the first one, item number 11, for adoption, bylaw 4719. Can I get a motion for adoption?
I'll move to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed?
Excuse me, Chair. I'm declaring conflict of interest on item 12 with respect to bylaw 4720. It makes reference to Emergency Management British Columbia, an agency or an organization of which I'm an employee.
All right, we'll wait. So with that recusal, we're looking for a motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt the bylaw.
Moved and seconded. It's good to get the new councillors doing that. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed?
Move.
Oh, we need to wait. Need to get him back in here. I know it seems silly. Can somebody grab Councillor Zelka?
He's coming.
Okay, now we can move it.
Move adjournment.
I probably even need a second for adjournment. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you very much. And we are going to be moving back into the